Hello and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence.
And I'm Meg Hopdall.
And today we're talking about Carrie the Musical. So Horror Rewind has the opportunity to sponsor our first musical production, and it's in Duluth, Minnesota, and it's Carrie the Musical. I mean, how perfect is this, Meg? I mean, it sounds like it's right up our alley, right?
It's like the universe came together just for us, yes. I mean, the fact that Carrie the Musical exists and that we got the opportunity, it's amazing. I mean, it's female-driven horror and theater, which is your wheelhouse, and I want to hear about your stage managing in it because I can't even imagine what that's even like.
Well, yeah, so I am the stage manager, and I'm going to be, in it, hands-on, calling cues, running whatever I need to run during the run of the show. But let me tell you about this show. First of all, it's amazing. I know people, when they hear Carrie the Musical, and if you Google it, you'll see a production from the early 2000s that was a disaster and a failure, and nobody liked it. This is a reboot, rewrite, and it came out in 2012. And this is a far superior written play, and the music is so good. And it's what was featured in the Riverdale episode in season 1, if you remember. They did Carrie the Musical. And I mean, I have to admit, that's the first time I listened to the music was on Riverdale, and I freaking loved it.
So here's a question. Maybe you don't know, but like, what do you think changed from? And maybe you specifically know, or maybe you could just guess. But what do you think changed from the first one that was a so-called disaster to the one now that is now more successful?
So I haven't, looked into this too much. I think some of it had to do with the script, and a lot of it had to do with the music. And this music in this production, it's so beautiful. It's complicated. Some of it is really difficult music, but this cast nails it. It is so amazing. We are so fortunate here in Duluth to have such a strong theater community. We also have a four-year University of Minnesota Duluth, that has a BFA program in musical theater, and a lot of these kids are in that program. And even the ones who aren't, they're still incredible. So the level of talent just blows me away, and I cannot wait for everybody to see it.
It makes such a difference. Like, you can have a good script and drop it into a place where there's just not a lot of talent with acting or directing or stage managing, but it sounds like you have an amazing script and amazing music, and then the support of people who know what they're doing to really lift this up and make it amazing. So I'm so excited to see it.
Yes. So a couple things about just some details about the musical if you plan to come. It's June 20th through the 29th. It's at 7:30 p.m. Those are Thursday through Saturday nights. You can get tickets if you just Google the Underground or Duluth Playhouse. That's where it is. It's produced by Rubber Chicken Theater. And on the 29th, Meg will be up and doing a book signing before the performance and during intermission.
Yeah, I'm excited because I feel like it's a great excuse for me to kind of poke my head in there and get involved in this tiny little way. And I feel like, I might just meet some cool people who are there to see Carrie the Musical and have a good chat. So it seems like a good place to sort of shill my female-driven horror wares. And so I'm very grateful to the Underground for allowing me to do that. And, it's just, I think that these are the kinds of things that we want to do. Horror Rewind, when we started out, it was just like this idea of, we knew we wanted to talk about horror, and we knew that we care about sort of the female aspect of horror, and making sure that we sort of cultivate roles for women. And this is sort of our, I think, first foray into really making that happen from Horror Rewind, not just as a podcast, but also just as a concept, right?
Yes. Now, what is your personal experience? I mean, we've talked about Carrie, the movie, it was one of our very first episodes when we started the podcast. Yeah. But what is your personal experience with the novel? And did you read this how old were you, and what effect did it have on you?
Okay, so this was my very first Stephen King novel that I ever read, which I think is awesome because it's his first one he wrote. And I read it when I want to say 12 or 13.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so it was perfect, and I think in a lot of ways it's why sort of Stephen King's always made sense for me as I like move forward in my life. And like I mentioned last time that I am reading Lisi's story, which is so funny because it's about marriage. It's really a novel about marriage and like being in marriage for a long time, which I'm at that point in my life. So it's sort of interesting how these things kind of work out. And with Carrie and reading about her experience with her period, it was exactly what I was going through at the time, and sort of her experience in high school. And I certainly didn't have a similar experience in high school as her, but I definitely, just like everyone, wondered who I was and how I fit in. And obviously I was, the horror girl, and I wasn't quite sure where I fit in. And seeing Carrie sort of harness these powers, for me, it's like, I guess a lot of kids, when they like sit down and they read Harry Potter, like that makes sense to them, and it's like that's the world that they sort of want to like pull the curtain back and look into, and that's awesome. But for me, this was a real turning point, I think, for me, just as a youth and as now an author and everything. So it's just one of those lucky things that sort of fell into my lap at that age, and I'm so glad it did, because I think too, Carrie is such a complicated character, and I'm interested to see how she's portrayed in the play compared to the novel and the movie. Where do you think she is in comparison to those other two medias?
It really depends on, how it's done. I think the way it's written and the way that it's played by our amazing, brilliant actress, Kelly Killoran, she is complicated. She is trying to be joyful in this non-joyful house, and she wants to be everything that everybody else seems to be in her mind, or who they seem to be portrayed as, but they're not letting her, and the choices that she makes. No, it's no spoilers, I suppose, what happens at the end of Carrie, but my goodness, it's a journey, and I have openly wept watching rehearsals of this show. I cannot wait to see it all. I can't wait for everybody to see it all come together, and it's so powerful. It's a really powerful show. That's the other thing I should talk about too, is like the tone of it. It's not, Rubber Chicken Theater is amazing, and they did Evil Dead the Musical, and that is very obviously Evil Dead. It's that Bruce Campbell sort of humor, and there was a splatter zone, and it was hilarious. This is not that kind of show. There's definitely some humor in it, but there's no splatter zone. It's not going to be that kind of horror play. It's a different kind, and just as enjoyable, I would say, but in a different way.
Okay, very interesting. Well, that kind of leaves me, when you use the word splatter, it kind of made me think of, are there logistical things, and I'm asking, like, as a stage manager, are there logistical things about, like, let's say the climax of Carrie that are, like, really difficult to pull off?
So I'm not going to give anything away, because I don't think I don't think we're revealing it to the public how this final sequence is going to be done. But it's beautiful and unique and not cheesy. So it's
right,
because I think that sometimes, and I think some productions, there's everybody does things in different ways, but there's ways to do it and keep the tone, so it keeps you in that world. I'll just say that.
Right. Okay, that's the most important thing, to keep us there.
Yeah. So we are going to listen to the director, who happens to be our friend, Nate Payne. He's going to talk about his experience directing Carrie and why he wanted to do this show. And we're also going to talk to a couple of the cast members. So stay tuned.
Will I be alone on Saturday night? Gotta worry. What if I stand up one place? I worry. What can I possibly do to make it perfect? The perfect skin, face, all ace. My folks, total jokes.
So I'm with Nate Payne, who is the director of Carrie the Musical, and you have heard him, of course, on the podcast before. Nate, tell us about your experience with Carrie itself, first of all, either the novel or the movie.
I saw the original movie first. I don't remember when I first saw it, but I've always been really interested in the story. I really enjoy all three versions of the movie, and I love the book.
Yes. So talk about this other version. I mean, we know about the remake from 2012 and, of course, the original. But this other one that's available on Amazon Prime currently, tell people about that.
It's from 2002, and it is pretty close to the novel. I actually really, really, really like a lot of the things. It has Angela Bettis as Carrie, and she's wonderful. Emile de Raven as Chris Hargensen, and it just, for me, because that was when I was in high school, was like 2002, 2003, that one was always really relatable. The problem with it is it has a horribly stupid ending, because apparently it was meant to be like the pilot for a series on TV. I don't know what exactly they would have done, but it ends with her like in a really bad wig, like driving off into the sunset basically with Sue, and they're like in hiding.
That is so interesting. I'm curious what that the treatment for that season 2 would have looked like, but we'll never know. So what?
Oh darn.
Yeah, what drew you to wanting to direct Carrie the Musical?
Well, when we finished Evil Dead, I wasn't really entirely sure what I wanted to do theatrically. I usually have a bucket list, but I didn't really have anything, and I knew that Carrie had existed as a musical in the 80s, but I didn't know anything other than that it was like notorious for having flopped hard. And then I found out that it was revived in 2012, and so I got it in my head that I wanted to eventually direct it. So, because I was too old to be in it, and and so I don't know. I've been just like bothering different people to produce it for a while, and then finally it came together, and we are doing it for real.
Now, Rubber Chicken Theater is producing this, and they are the same theater company here in town that produced Evil Dead the Musical. So if you enjoyed that, you'll enjoy this, but in a different way.
Yes, it's a very, very different kind of show. That show is very high camp and ridiculous, over-the-top amounts of blood. Like our Splatter Zone, I know that show is like well known for having a Splatter Zone, but we were kind of known for the amount. Like we would rig the ceiling to like dump on audience members and stuff, like very crazy. Carrie, on the other hand, has no blood spraying on the audience and is a lot more of a kind of straightforward drama.
Yeah, people keep saying, how are you going to do this, and what's the tone? How does that work? And believe me, it does. I mentioned earlier on this episode that my first hearing of the music and seeing it was on the Riverdale episode. So I already was in, no pun intended, that's one of the songs, you guys. But I have fallen in love with this show as we've rehearsed it. Do you have a favorite song or a favorite moment in this play?
I have a lot of favorite songs. My favorite of the youthful teen songs is probably The World According to Chris. It's just a fun, like, upbeat song that is also really mean. I love Chris Hargensen. She's wonderful. And then between Carrie and her mother, that one's tough. I really like all of it, but especially Evening Prayers probably. And then the other, I don't know. It's hard with our actors, and I'm gonna toot the horn of some of these people. Our actors who play Carrie and her mother are so intense, and the relationship between them comes across so well, and I couldn't be more thrilled with our cast. So it kind of affects how much I like certain songs. Like, there are songs in the album that I'm like, whatever, but in our show, they're amazing. So, yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. This is a top-notch cast, and I cannot wait for everyone to see this show. Is there anything else you want people to know about Carrie the Musical?
Yeah, well, you can find a lot of performances of it on like YouTube, and I have come to learn from checking those out that this is a really difficult show to get right. That is like my number one fear of doing this show, was that it would be it's really easy to screw it up, and we were lucky enough to have some genuinely like fabulous people audition. Beyond my wildest dreams, some of these people, like, it blows my mind. And it's just, our cast has both me and you like in tears like all the time, and it's just, I don't even know how to describe it other than excitement. And just as a director, a lot of directing is really stressful.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to put theater together, a play. So, yes, come out and see it. It opens tonight. It runs through the 29th. And stop by and you get to meet Nate.
Yes, and also you get to meet Kelly and Meg, and you can buy things, and there's going to be adult beverages and youth beverages, and it's a great show. I feel like we push the rating a little more than a lot of productions of this show, so, you know, maybe don't bring the youth ones, but if you've got like a teenager, it's all good.
Yeah, I agree.
You ain't seen nothing yet. It's gonna be a night we'll never forget. You ain't seen nothing yet. It's gonna be a night we'll never forget.
I'm here with Kelly Kaloran, and she plays Carrie White in Carrie the Musical. So, do you want to tell us about your own experience with Carrie, either as a book or a movie?
Sure. So, first I saw the original movie upon hearing that I got cast as Carrie. So I watched that first, and I really, really liked it. I cried. It was so good and terrible and sad. And then I read the book, and the book, especially with the role of Carrie, made me think about her a little differently, because in the book she's talked a lot more about her being ugly, and, you know, in the beginning of the book at least. And of course it talks about her being beautiful too and having that side of her too, but yeah, I definitely learned more about her character from the book.
So where are you coming from? What sort of place are you coming from playing this character? Like, are you taking anything from the movie that you saw? What are you taking from the book? What are you taking from the script itself?
Sure. I really, really liked Sissy Spacek's portrayal of her. So I'm definitely trying to pull a lot from that portrayal. And the book just giving me a lot of background information on her, like her story growing up as a child and all of that. I'm trying to include in how I'm thinking of her and how she would react to things and all of that. But yeah, I definitely am trying to get that, very beaten down, through the years bullied, and like she's really a victim of everything that's happened to her, and I want to really portray that and get the audience to care for her.
Is there a favorite moment or a favorite song in this show for you?
Honestly, the whole show is really fun, but the prom, just all of it, from dancing with Tommy and singing Dreamer in Disguise reprise to the destruction and killing everyone, is super, super great, and I love it.
It is so emotional, and I didn't realize that your performance and you killing everybody, this sounds horrible, but it is so powerful, and I cry every time I see it now. So congratulations. This is a great performance.
Yay, thank you.
You are incredible. And what is your background with theater? Do you have training? I know you just graduated from high school, so this is like you're very close to the role in age and everything. But how did you get into theater?
Sure. So I've always been dancing. I've been dancing since I was 4, so that got me into performing and being on stage. But my first theatrical experience was when I was 8 years old. I did a 1-week camp at the Playhouse, and I've done lots of shows at the Playhouse and on the North Shore and all of that. So I do a lot of shows there, and I keep up with dancing. So yeah, and I've been just doing that a lot. So yeah, I'd say I have training and stuff like that.
Yeah, great. And now, what are your plans, if you're willing to share, what are your plans for the future?
Yeah, totally. I've gotten this question a lot being a senior and just graduating. I'm going to Northwestern University in the fall, which is out in Chicago, and I'm going to study theater, so.
Oh, congratulations. That is so amazing. So if you get the chance to come see Kelly as Carrie, we have one of the very few, I think, dancing Carries from this musical, because a lot of times, and we've seen some bootleg versions, Carrie doesn't always dance, right?
Oh yeah, no, she never hardly dances, and yeah, so in our version, I guess we're having her dance a little bit, and when she goes into her dream world, and I don't really think that she's actually dancing in the physical whatever,
Right.
but yeah, I think it's great that we're getting to have a little bit more artistic expression with her.
Yes, and so come see Kelly as Carrie. She is so talented, and I can't wait for you to see the show. Okay, I am here with Patrick Timmons, and he is playing Billy in Carrie the Musical. So tell us about your experience with either seeing Carrie, hearing about the musical, and your approach to this character.
Okay, so I've actually only seen the revived version of it, the revived movie back in 2012, I believe
Yeah.
the year was. And honestly, what struck a chord with me was just how relevant it was with the issue of bullying and what it can bring about, because I think that the parallels that I've kind of drawn between like what happens with Carrie and what's happening in our real world is like school shootings and just different things like that, or whether it be people in the LGBT community that are going through intense bullying and they commit self-harm and stuff like that. And it was obviously Carrie is a very drastic take on what can come of it, but it's really relevant to what's going on today. And so hearing that it was a musical, I was first intrigued as to how horror can be presented on stage, because I wasn't very familiar with that genre just being put into a production like this. And I was most excited by Billy because I am nothing like him in real life. I like to think that I'm a giddy little boy, and he's a very bad boy. And my whole approach kind of has been what pushes these people to their limits, what pushes them to their dark side, and what brings out that dark side, and how does it manifest into what obviously happens at the end of Carrie. And I think that with this production in particular, it's obviously helpful with the music being so spooky, ominous, and brilliant, but the actors that I get to work with are really showing that we can definitely bring horror to the stage. And along those lines as well, we've got an excellent choreographer who's making movement for that, and making, like, the death scene is just fantastic, spooky, and of course the effects that are going to be added on top of that are, I think, going to terrify the people that watch the show. And so it's been really exciting.
I agree. Something I've heard about from people who play bad guys, you're kind of a bad guy, I would say, in this play, is that they hate the feeling of it. Like afterwards, they go home and they feel bad about themselves, or they don't like interacting with audience members afterwards because it's like, I don't even want to shake your hand or whatever. How do you feel like you have been able to handle that? And have you played a bad guy before in a play, and how do you handle that?
I was just in a play at UMD. We did Time's Up, and I played like the epitome of a misogynist asshole. His name was Paphnutius. It's based on this really old play called Thais, and basically what he is this religious leader, or not necessarily a leader, but a man in power who finds his values throughout religion, and that's what kind of brings him to these conclusions as to why he needs to do the action that he does. And that production really helped me in digging deep into the character to find the motivation for what he does, because there's always motivation to to a person's actions, and there's always the person who is committing the action is always thinking they're doing the right thing. So that's what's really helpful for me, is searching for those morals that Billy has held and why he goes about what he ends up doing in the show. And interestingly enough, just with my personality, like as me, Patrick Timmons, I do like to be very bubbly, and I like to start up a conversation with those people that do see the show. I hope that they're willing to approach me afterwards, because that is the thing. Sometimes they're like, you are such an asshole, aren't you? And I don't know how to respond. I mean, the best I do respond to that is like, well, I mean, my character is, but it strikes up a fun conversation, and it's also just really interesting to, figure out why people do what they do.
I think that you bring up a good point, because people always have motivation. It doesn't justify what they're doing, but yet they're doing it for some reason. And so it's like digging into that background is fascinating. Anything else you want to say to the people about Carrie the Musical, or what the future holds for you yourself?
Ooh. Well, as for Carrie the Musical, I think that everybody in that audience is in for a treat, because I mean, just like I did when I first heard that Carrie was a musical, I was skeptical. I was like, is this really possible to be put on a stage? Is it really going to be that captivating as the movie is, as the book is? And I can 100% tell you that it is just as captivating, if not more so, than the movie. The book, of course, it's the Bible. It's lovely. Yeah. And just for me, Patrick Timmons, I do have a few shows coming up in case you are entranced by my performance and would like to see another. I will be in Fun Home at Renegade Theater this upcoming, I guess, just later in the summer, at the end of the summer. And then afterwards, I am cast in Enemy of the People at UMD. I will be playing, once again, another bad guy. Yeah.
We hope that you're not typecast your entire career, but I'm so thankful that you are Billy.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor.
So I'm here with Rachel Williams, and she plays Sue Snell in the play Carrie the Musical. So tell me about how you've approached this character, and did you do any research? Did you watch the movie, read the book, anything, or just are you going by the script?
I read the book, but I think I really wanted to make Sue different than other Sues before, just because I see Sue as such a privileged person, so most of it is from the script.
Excellent. So tell us, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about yourself and your theater background and your experience.
Yeah, well, I started doing theater in high school, and there's this really amazing program called Spotlight Education in the cities, and it's also moving around to every school in the state, and so I got a lot of opportunities with Spotlight, and I actually won a trip to New York my senior year, so I decided to go into theater as a profession, hopefully. So, and here I am.
Very nice. You're so talented, and I cannot tell you, I mean, everybody who comes to see the show will be able to see, but I cannot tell you how joyful it is just to watch you in this part and every night on stage. You're so incredible, and so it's a joy. I think Sue is one of those characters, though. I mean, like you said, she's got a lot of privilege, and she's coming from this place of, she really has some power, and what is she going to do with this situation? Do you think she makes the right decision? I mean, obviously, bad things happen, but what do you think?
Oh, thank you. And yeah, I think Sue has good morals. She's just never had to use them before. So this is like the first time she's ever made a really big decision, and I think it's the right one. Unfortunately, other people get in the way, and I think Sue's a little naive, but I guess that's the problem with Carrie and how the bullying started in the first place, was Sue being naive.
Right. So this interesting thing about this show is it's basically Sue's show, because you're telling the story, and we're learning this through your perspective and your storytelling. Is there a favorite moment that you have, or a favorite song in the show that really sticks out to you that you love to play every time that we've rehearsed it so far?
Yeah, I really love Once You See. And that's Sue's solo where she sings about Carrie and like seeing Carrie for the first time in a new light. And I think it's nice to have other people talk about Carrie from an outside perspective, and I think Carrie deserves it. She's a character that deserves to hear people talk about her like a human being.
Yes, great point. So if for people listening, where can they see you next? What are you, if you're willing to share, what's your journey in life? You're a BFA major, is that right?
I'm a BA major.
Okay.
Yes. So
And so what are you doing next? Sorry.
I still have senior year, so next year I'll be starring as Petra in Enemy of the People at UMD's production, and then I'll be finishing off my business courses and theater courses and hopefully going into something on the business side of theater.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm here with Megan Jarecki, who plays Chris in Carrie the Musical. Tell me about this character, and is it fun to play a bad girl?
I never ever get to play the bad girl, so playing Chris is so much fun, and she's so complex. Like, you'd think she's just like mean for no reason. So digging in with Nate, we did some table work together, really going over like what makes her her and finding moments to make her human but not make her soft has been really interesting and fun and such a challenge. And it's been really cool to act alongside Kelly because she and I have known each other for years, so there's just a lot of trust there. And it's really just cool to get to play with what that is and who she is, and really falling in love with playing someone who is so much a departure from who I am as a person.
Yes, I think it's fascinating to like play a mean girl or a bad guy, and kind of we were talking. I was talking to Patrick about playing Billy and finding that motivation to make it come from a real place. So, do you mind sharing with listeners how did you come? What was driving Chris?
For sure. So like personally, I feel very passionately about things. I have a lot of emotions and they all come out very, very strongly. And so for Chris, I found a way to channel that from from her home life. She mentions in her song, The World According to Chris, how her dad taught her all these things. And so I just think about how her home life impacts the way she treats other people. So I feel like her mom's not super present and her dad is just kind of ruling her whole world, and she sees the way he is, and he's like a lawyer, so he's always on the defense, and so she's learned to play offense and learned to really go for people before they can get to her. So I've played a lot with that, and I feel like we've all been bullied at some point in our lives, so really trying to think, why would someone do that, and turning it around and going, this is why I'm doing that. It's just made it a lot easier than just being like, I'm going to be mean for this reason. Really just turning it into how can I make it, quote, like a positive. It's obviously negative, but like making it a positive so it's easier to play and easier to make choices to other people versus just being like, I'm mean, I'm grumpy.
Yeah. An interesting line that is like so current is apparently Chris doesn't get into college and then her dad pulls a few strings, obviously gives some money, and that's like happening with celebrities right now. Yeah. And that too could be a motivation because it's like Chris really wants to live up to this level of fame and fortune, but she can't, so maybe she's insecure.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel like she's so insecure next to Sue. I mean, she loves Sue like nothing else, which is why she can impact her the most. Like, Chris can be so mean to Sue, but they're like sisters in her mind, so she wants to be there. She's trying to be present and be a part of that without being so like, oh yeah, I like really wanted to get into Brown, I like really wanted to do that, and Sue questions that, so it's like a little bit like, yeah, so like Dad fixed it for me. It's all good. It's all fine. And it's really interesting that that's happening today. And you've got to wonder. I know, I guess for me, I've thought a lot about like, wow, that is crazy. Just, you never think people would do that. It's just like a line in a show, but it's real.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing we were talking with Patrick about is like this motivation. It doesn't excuse the behavior, but it explains it. And so that too of like parents just want the best for their kids, so they'll help them out, but it's not right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like the thing to remember when seeing a show like this or seeing a movie like this is like, yeah, they're the bad guy, but they're also human, and there's a reason they are this way. And I feel like finding a way to empathize with even like the worst of characters. I mean, obviously you don't want to be like, oh my gosh, I love like the serial killer, but you want to understand more, I guess. I don't know. It's a lot easier for me to look at a character and understand where they're coming from, especially in this situation. There are some where it's like, probably can't relate to that, but I can understand more of where she's coming from than I did before doing this show. And I really would be like, oh yeah, she's evil, she's the worst. But now it's like, yeah, she's mean, she does bad things, but there's a reason for why she does everything. She's calculated and complex, and I love that about her.
That's great. Now, if you're willing to share with listeners, what's next for you in the world or in the theater?
Absolutely. So I have two projects. One is still under wraps, one I'm not allowed to discuss yet. I've been asked not to say. But I am so lucky and so blessed to be starring in my first professional production. It's called La La Lucille. It's the first revival of George Gershwin's first ever musical, and that is July 25th. So right after Carrie, I ship out and start rehearsing for La La Lucille. We've got 2.5 weeks of rehearsal. We run for 6 weeks till September 1st. And then my next project is this winter back here in Duluth. So be watching out in your on your Facebook pages and everything that's going on around Duluth, and you might catch my name.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We'll never forget.